Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a small burg after all, right? So there you go.
Right.
All right. It looks like it's 6 o'clock. So this is the City's Council work session for May 17th, 2021. The meeting is now called to order. I'll draw your attention to the fact that the agenda for this meeting and the business session is also available in Spanish. A roll call vote, please. Our city recorder, Sue Ryan.
Councillor McBride,
Here.
Councillor Cofield,
Here.
Councillor Yarnell Holloman,
Here.
Councillor Martinez Plancarte,
Present.
Mayor Rogers,
Present.
Councillor Bacon,
Here.
Councillor Finley,
Here.
Mr. Mayor, all present.
All right, thank you very much. Review of the council agenda and meeting. Any items for any changes you'd like to see on the business session, folks? All right, seeing none. Any council business items before we move to presentations? Hearing none. All right, let's move on to presentations. We're on item 5A, Portland General Electric presentation on resiliency and emergency planning. So I think we've got a couple of folks on the call. And I think Maria Pope is one. I see Wendy Veliz is on as well. Greetings, Wendy. Good evening, Maria. If you all want to take it away, that would be great.
Okay, let me bring up the presentation. I'm going to share my screen here, and can you all...
Actually, shouldn't it be Councillor Veliz? Shouldn't I actually be addressing you that way? Should I not? Sorry, where are my manners, right?
No. Today I am PGE.
Oh, that's
Local
right.
Government
That's right.
Affairs.
Other hat.
That's my other hat today. So please.
We just say, ma'am, and may we bow down in front of you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Can you all see this? My screen?
Not yet.
It's taking a minute, I think. It generally does. Share screen, and hopefully this was working now.
Oh, there we go. It's up, Wendy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Rogers and members of the City Council, Dan and city staff. Thank you for making time for us this evening. I'm Wendy Veliz, your local government affairs manager, and it's an honor to be here with you virtually. I wanted to first thank you for your support during the February ice storm. Your partnership was very important and valuable to us, and we greatly appreciate it. Joining me today is my honor to introduce PGE's President and CEO, Maria Pope, along with our Manager of Business Continuity and Emergency Management, Jay Jewis, and our Senior Director of Transmission and Distribution Operations, Tom Yost. Maria, Jay, and Tom are going to provide you a brief ice storm update to talk about what we're doing to enhance resiliency for Newberg and the residents, and discuss the overall strategy around resiliency and emergency preparedness. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our President and CEO, Maria Pope, to talk a little bit about our community involvement with Newberg and some of our shared goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Mayor Rogers and council members. It is a great pleasure to be with you here today. I don't have to tell you that the past 12 months have been historic. And I think all of us are feeling fatigued and weary. Just a few weeks ago, we experienced a 1 in 40 year ice event that did devastating damage and caused more than half of PG customers to lose power, some experiencing outages multiple times. Overall, we had about over 750,000 outages. And just for perspective, we have about just under 1 million customers. So with the customers that were out multiple times, it really was a historic restoration for us. Newberg was hit particularly hard. You had 2,600 total customers out of power. And we know that these can be very, very difficult. And particularly, we heard from a number of you, and thank you very much for your feedback and for your patience while we work to safely restore power during the historic storm. In the fall, our region also experienced devastating wildfires, which were the direct results of a changing weather pattern and global warming. And of course, we've all suffered through the pandemic, which has resulted in additional economic stress to our customers, cities, communities, making our resiliency work more challenging than ever. These events underscore the importance, and I truly believe we are humbled by our role as an essential service provider. And we recognize that we need to also transition to delivering clean energy and ensuring that we can leave a better planet for the next generation. We're on 3 distinct pathways to make this happen. The first one is that we're decarbonizing our energy supply. The second one is that we're expanding electrification. And we know that 40% of Oregon's greenhouse gases actually come from the transportation sector. And through partnerships with Daimler and Lyft and many others, as well as some of the changes being made in the Oregon legislature as we speak, we'll be able to do more in this regard. And then finally, performance. We know that to serve you all and your community members, you have changing expectations, and they are rising of us and every single one of us that work at PGE. We are on our way to a goal of reducing carbon emissions with the power that we serve customers by 80% by 2030. And we're working with all stakeholders to meet an aspirational goal, which means that we'll take technological transformation to get to zero emissions associated with the power we serve customers by 2040. And my commitment to you is that we are going to transform our company to meet these aggressive goals, maintaining and enhancing our commitment to resiliency and reliability, as well as affordability. We know that those are as important as we move into the future as they are today and as they have been in our past. So this includes ongoing purposeful investments in transmission, in distribution, in grid hardening, as well as leveraging technology to strengthen our overall resilience and reliability. Jay Jewis and Tom Yost are going to spend more time talking to you about their storm events and the damage that they caused, as well as the restoration and recovery events and what we are doing to accelerate our grid hardening work right now as we speak and prepare for the future. And most importantly, we're very much learning and partnering with all of you. So if we can turn to the next slide, I really want to talk about one of the things that I found most humbling and most heartening, and that is that partnerships between the city of Newberg and the other communities that we serve are critically important to really serving all communities well, and that we need to be agile and well prepared. I also want to make sure that we take this moment to thank you and your staff for the collaboration and communication, particularly during the February storms and last fall during the Chehalem Mountain Fire. It was invaluable to us to have personnel in direct communications with your leadership team, your staff, your county emergency management, and first responders. It made an enormous difference in us understanding where critical infrastructure was, where vulnerable citizens were and community members, and really ensuring that we could get the power restored as quickly and as safely as possible. We're also excited about collaborating on a number of fronts. First, LED streetlights. This year, the city of Newberg is transitioning more than 1,200 streetlights to LED. And we appreciate the invaluable feedback, and I promise you we heard it, and the collaboration with Kevin Muck and Wendy Valise on creating the additional LED streetlight options. So thank you. Also, the 400 kilowatt solar project at the Newberg wastewater treatment plant. It was made possible in part by the PGE Renewable Development Fund, which awarded $150,000 along with other partners, clearly making a difference in sustainability and lowering the overall utility bills for the wastewater treatment facility. And I will tell you, after the ice storms, I gained an entirely new appreciation for wastewater treatment facilities and the importance of resiliency of those facilities. So thank you. I'm so proud that we have been serving Newberg for over 130 years. And PG is honored to be a partner in serving not only your community members and your businesses, but also the vitality of your city. We have a line center in your area. Many of our coworkers work there, and obviously we're a taxpayer. We franchise fees and everything else. I promise you, Newberg and Yamhill County are extremely important to us, and we have a lot in common. It's really important that we come together as essential service providers, because we care about ensuring an energy system for your residents continues to be safe and reliable, and that we are all well prepared for disasters that will likely come in our future. So with that, let me turn it over to Tom, who will share more about what we're doing to meet our common goals. Tom?
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. I'm not sure if you can see me. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. Obviously, I'm
Yeah,
having.
we can see you.
Oh, you can? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot. Well, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Mayor Rogers and the City Council of Newberg. My pleasure to be with you this evening and just share some facts on our 40-year ice event that we had back in February. That is one storm. I think that is probably, I've been in this business about 30 years in the utility industry, and that is one storm I will never forget. Again, 40-year ice event. And this storm was very unique. It hit us really in 3 waves. The first wave hit us Wednesday night, February 10th. That was wave number 1. And we actually fared fairly well through that first wave. And we were kind of thinking, well, maybe this is not all the weather forecasters thought this storm was gonna, that they forecasted. And then we got hit with wave number 2, which was on Friday. And then we actually got hit with wave number 3, which was on Sunday. So again, this storm was very unique in the way it came in. And as Maria mentioned, we had restored power to 750,000 customers. So if you think about that, and some of these customers actually had more than one outage. So what would happen is we'd have a tree go down in a line, customers would have an outage, we'd get that line back up, and then the next wave would come in, same thing would happen just down the road, another tree would go through the line, et cetera. So yeah, just over 750,000 customers were restored in a 3-week time period. So we had ice as thick as 1.5 inches around our line. So if you picture a piece of wire with just almost this perfect cylinder of ice around it, and you can just think of the weight that added to our lines and how that forced the lines to come down. And actually, in some cases, it would snap the poles and with all that added weight and pull the lines down. So crazy amount of damage that we received on the storm. As Maria mentioned, Newberg had just over 2,600 customer outages, and we worked our tails off to get you folks back in power. We had very good coordination with the Yamhill emergency management folks. And just to put in perspective, the damage from the storm. So we brought in over 270 external crews. That is crazy. We brought in crews from as far as Canada, Utah, California, and that was just line crews. Then in addition, we brought in another 130 vegetation management crews to help us remove trees, branches, et cetera, from our line. So it was just a historic effort. In fact, that was the most crews that this company, PG, has ever had on their property at one single time. So kudos to everybody that worked on that storm, from Wendy, who helped us out in the emergency management arena, to Jay Jewis, who's going to speak here in just a little bit on emergency management. But we had just, it was an all hands on deck type of storm for us. So next slide, Wendy. And so with that, we learned a lot from that storm, and we're doing a lot to strengthen our system, our grid, and build resiliency. So a lot of good efforts are going on in this area. We're actually now using ductile iron poles in all of our high-risk wildfire areas. In addition, we're using fiberglass cross arms. And so if you think about that, of course, the ductile iron and the fiberglass cross arms, they don't burn, which is really good versus say a wood pole and a wood cross arm. We're also using tree wire at this time in our high-risk areas. Much greater use of automation across our system. We're now using electronic fuses versus the old expulsion type fuses. in many, many areas. And also a lot of efforts with distribution automation across our system too. And really, that's really kind of like a smart grid type setup to where it'll talk to each other, the devices, and they'll actually restore customers automatically. So lots of great efforts that are in that particular area. We also have a very robust vegetation management effort in the company. We trim roughly 4,100 miles every single year, getting trees and limbs and all types of vegetation away from our lines. In addition, we have a very robust, what we call a fitness program, which is an annual program where we inspect just under 30,000 poles each and every year. In fact, and actually in 2021, we will replace roughly 3,000 poles this year. So lots of efforts that we're spending in the area of building strength in our grid and resiliency. And hats off, we have lots of great efforts dealing with great neighbors like Newberg. We've got the overhead to underground conversion on Fulton Road, and of course the revitalization down there by the riverfront. So appreciate everybody's efforts, and we've had a great working relationship with Newberg. And I always love to Maria, we have a wine center in Newberg. That's one of my favorite wine centers to visit. I just love the drive in from the Portland area. So beautiful area. And with that, Wendy, I think we're going to turn it over to Jay.
All right, thank you, Tom. To enhance resiliency within our company and communities, we need to be prepared for all hazards. As Maria and Tom discussed over the past year, we've experienced a pandemic, multiple historic storms, and wildfire events. And we, as PG, we're continuing to ramp up security so we can protect our systems, structures, and employees from the rising threat of cyber attacks. You know, similar to what just happened at Colonial Pipeline, the recent ransomware attack. And also we're beefing up our physical security to prevent attacks, including from terrorism. We're working at the local, state, and federal partners to be able to respond to the threat of a Cascadia level earthquake in our region. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. And as regional emergencies become a little bit more frequent in recent years, we're working to handle those when we're working to handle those. That's particularly important because we're part of a large Western grid, which connects the electricity for 11 Western states and parts of Canada. So some of the ways in which we prepare is plan, train, and exercise. And you know, we use the Incident Command System, National Incident Management System, just like fire departments and FEMA uses, so that we can be interoperable. Other ways we prepare are system improvements. We ensure that our grid is hardened, you know, to withstand storms, fire, and earthquakes. And, you know, we look at redundant systems as far as we're building an integrated operations center to be our primary center, which is seismically resilient to withstand a Cascadia earthquake, and will be operational here at the end of 2021, start of 2022. And we have backup control centers and backup data centers. Then we build strategic partners at the local, state and federal level. And that's one of the reasons why we're really happy to be here tonight, is so that we can build those relationships and partnerships with you at City Newberg. Next slide, please. So I was told not to scare you. So when I give this presentation to our employees, I say, I'm not here to scare you, I'm here to prepare you. So for Cascadia earthquake, I think you're all well aware there's a subduction zone that runs up from Northern California all the way to British Columbia, 700 mile fault line. And you know, it's the North American plate is resting on another tectonic plate. And as these plates rub together, at some point, the friction builds up and pop. And the interesting thing about a Cascadia, I guess you call it interesting, is it's not a single point earthquake. You'll feel impacts all along the fault line. So from Northern California again all the way up to British Columbia, you'll feel impacts. If you look at the map that's depicted there, PG's service territory and you know, City Newberg lies right along the orange and yellow intersection there, which is moderate to severe impact areas. So the challenge for us at PG is that a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is going to impact our whole service territory. So it's going to impact the crews that would be responsible for restoring power. If you look at the time from the Oregon Resiliency Plan, they estimate 1 to 3 months to restore power. And I think that's actually a little bit optimistic, being that there's interdependencies on road infrastructure and fuel for us, and for other critical infrastructure, they're dependent on power. So it's going to take a whole community effort to restore normalcy to the area after a cascaded earthquake. So that's why it's important that we work together and train together to prepare for this. Some of the things that we're doing is, again, hardening our grid, our generation, transmission, distribution infrastructure, and then we have backup control centers that are earthquake resilient. Next slide, please, Wendy. So one of the areas that we're very concerned with nowadays is wildfires. In recent years, we realized what happened in California could happen in Oregon, and we saw it last year in September that it did happen up here. As such, we've been preparing for wildfires, and we stood up a wildfire mitigation resilience team to look at how to best prevent and respond to wildfires as a utility. Our program basically encompasses the items listed on the slide. When we did fire risk modeling, we found one of the highest risk areas for wildfires to be in their service territory up by the Mount Hood corridor. So during the September 2020 Labor Day storm and wildfire event, as a preventive measure, due to conditions, we executed a public safety power shutoff, the first one for our utility, where we proactively shut power off in the high-risk fire zone of Mount Hood. And this impacted about 5,000 customers, but we proactively reached out to customers in the region as well as local and state government leaders to communicate this, but it was a preventative nature so that we didn't ignite the fire due to conditions. The PSPS occurred in parallel with a windstorm that hit our service territory that caused massive power outages. At its peak, over 100,000 PG customers were without power, and as you're aware, the devastation from the wildfires was historic. Just for note, this year is shaping up to be a bad one for wildfires once again as drought conditions persist, dried out the forests and wildland areas. So we'll continue to use proactive measures and steps in coordination with internal and external stakeholders to prioritize safety. But I do want to say that we greatly appreciate the ongoing partnership between the City of Newberg and PGE, and I'll pass it back to Maria.
Off mute. There we go. Thank you. As Tom mentioned, there are many lessons learned during the February ice storms, as well as the wildfires of last fall. But most important lesson to all of us is that in facing events of the magnitude that we have recently requires strong and ongoing partnerships. And in that spirit, I want to make sure that you know that it's our intention to keep on working as closely with you as we have in the past. Wendy Valise is the member of our team who's on point. And clearly, if the streetlight LED conversion is any indication, you all are in good hands. And please know that we really value the partnership. Wendy, as we turn to the next slide on questions, Mayor Rogers and the entire City Council and staff, thank you for your time, and I'd love to take any questions. And for the really the strong partnership through these unprecedented times. We are humbled by what we faced, but also know that being an essential service provider is a privilege and something that your community members rely upon. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Maria, Wendy, Tom, Jay. Thank you very much. Questions, anyone? All right. I'll just make one comment. And I know Wendy is familiar with this, but one of our council goals, aside from obviously resiliency and that kind of thing, one of our key goals is sustainability. So hearing about the solar plant is great news. And again, LED lights. But anyway, so thank you very much. Mike, it looks like you have a question. Go for it.
Yes, I was just wondering if your system does get hacked, what is the company's policy? Is it to pay the ransom that they're wanting, or to use your IT people to try and get around and put a fix to it?
You know, that is a very good question. And first of all, you should know that we take cybersecurity extremely seriously. And we have been investing extensively in our cyber capabilities and work very closely with the Departments of Homeland Security, the FBI, as well as others. And we also work collaboratively across the utilities across the country on these issues, as well as supply chain. We do have someone who we've done tabletop exercises with and have worked with our board of directors, and that kind of person is called a breach coach. And this is someone who operated the military at the highest levels. And we have discussed what is going on across the globe with regards to ransomware. And I will tell you, we don't have a firm answer for you. It's complex, and the trade-offs can be significant. But we have spent quite a bit of time talking about it, understanding how it works, the different players and actors involved globally, as well as in the United States. And while I don't know how we would react, because I don't know how we could potentially be affected, I please know that these issues are not lost on us, and we have studied them and worked them diligently.
Councilor Cofield.
It's a great question.
Thank you for the response to that, as well as the presentation. It's super informative. Also, like Rick had mentioned, and grateful to hear about your efforts. I think you said to reduce carbon emissions by 80% in 9 to 10 years. That's an incredibly ambitious goal. I'm excited to see how that plays out. There were a couple mentions of automation, which is exciting to me, and it sounds as though if I heard correctly, Tom, when you were presenting, it allows for a quicker response to getting power back on and whatnot. Does it have an adverse effect on jobs? I know that for a number of folks, that's an ongoing sort of fear of automation, is that it would impact jobs for folks. Would love to just hear a bit about that.
Great question. Actually, with the increase in technology, always comes an increase in our employees' training that they'll need for this and their overall job level skills. So really, as we increase technology, their skill sets actually rise, and we are not seeing any decreases. I hate to say at this point in time, not hate to say, but at this point in time with this automation. Really, the automation is all about getting our customers back in power quicker, which is a benefit to all. But really, it's a win-win for our customers, the company, and our employees, because their skill sets just will increase.
That makes sense. Thank
Also
you.
add that the increased technology and better efficiency, quite frankly, it adds to job satisfaction. It adds to a sense of accomplishment, and it really allows the different parts of our company to act more seamlessly as one company through better uses of technology. And if you are someone who's on the front lines, whether it's someone in the call center, answering the phones, or dealing with someone over a chat, or other sorts of technologies, or you may be a lineman out, particularly in bad weather, to be able to answer questions more accurately and have that seamless visibility is invaluable to our customers. Because not only do you want your power restored as quickly as possible, you want to know when it will be restored. And I think those are really important. The other is that our area is growing. Your area in particular is growing. And so increased uses of technology allows us to better serve you with new connections and more resiliency, LED street lightings, while keeping prices affordable. So it's really, really important. Technology it's not only good for us as a company, it's good for customers in terms of services, but it's essential to keeping our service affordable.
Thank you.
All that
Any other
makes
questions?
sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, folks? All right, seeing none. Well, again, thank you all so very much for your time and the service you provide. Please come to the Line Center anytime. You know, we've got, wine tasting here in Newberg. We've got a beautiful community. Come down anytime, right? So you are welcome. So thank you all very much, and have a nice evening. So
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mayor. We're grateful
Thank
for
you.
your time this evening and the
Yes.
partnership. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right, so let's move on to item 5B, the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue District Annual Presentation on State of the District. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Thank you for having me. My name is Kenny Frentress. I'm the Deputy Chief of Operations. So I oversee our operations, our EMS division, and our training division. And I'm honored to be here tonight to give you the annual State of the District presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'll just roll through this, and I'd be happy to answer any and all questions at the end. So this is a picture of one of our firefighters. This is the PPE, or the protective equipment that they've been wearing for over a year now, particularly with high-risk COVID patients. It's a kind of a plastic suit, and then you'll notice they have additional respiratory protection. And I can tell you early on in the global pandemic, we were at the very front end of it. We immediately formed a task force that analyzed creating emergency business plans, emergency operational plans. We put out a daily IAP, and we got out in front of the potential PPE shortage and ensured that our crews could continue to respond to, first and foremost, keep themselves safe and keep our community safe. And I'm extremely proud of our organization as we've navigated really an unprecedented event. Early on, and actually throughout this process, we've had an outpouring of community support. This is a picture of donations that we had dropped off, and we had community members showing up at fire stations, and if they only had one N95 mask to give, they would literally ask if our firefighters could use it. Incredible support from our community. We had donations from local businesses, school districts, and we certainly appreciate the partnership from our community as we navigated this crisis. Business changed for us throughout this year, but we still maintained connectivity to our community through some creative ways. One of the things that I'll always remember about this global pandemic is some of the drive-by graduation parties and birthday parties that we were able to do to maintain that connective level to our community. In February, we celebrated a cardiac arrest save that happened in Wilsonville, highlighting a local doctor and his wife's life-saving efforts. You can see that on our social media. And we're still doing monthly virtual wildfire preparedness meetings. A big part of our focus since December has been supporting the vaccination effort. And we were really at the front end of this as well, partnering with our counties. We formed a vaccine branch that reported to our Task Force 1. And I'm proud to say that as of today, we have vaccinated roughly over 65,000 citizens. We've, as I mentioned, partnered with our counties and taken direction from them. And we've had clinics that initially started at our facilities, and then we changed locations to the Clackamas Community College campus in Wilsonville. We've had drive-through clinics at the Nike headquarters, and pictured here, the Evergreen Theater, as well as walk-in clinics at McMinnville High School. Additionally, we've been able to do some outreach vaccinations to homebound adult foster care folks, and we are continuing that effort as we speak today. This is a picture of our Newberg police officers being vaccinated. We felt honored and privileged to be part of vaccinating their workforce to ensure their safety. As it was mentioned in the previous presentation by PGE, we also had an unprecedented fire event throughout not only our service area, but in Oregon, that we were part of a greater effort. Locally, our biggest fire was the Chehalem Mountain Fire, which burned a little over 800 acres. We were able to save every structure and keep everybody safe with no injuries, no lives lost. Extremely proud of our crews as we fought that wildland urban interface fire. Additionally, we had multiple alarm fires going throughout that week-long event, and we were able to support some of the bigger fires that were going on in Clackamas County by sending crews over there. We sent crews down to Medford, and the efforts that they had with those large complex fires that devastated entire cities. And later we were able to send crews down to California and help our neighbors to the south. Spend just a little bit of time on this slide. This is to give you a rough idea of how much data we drill down into. And this is reflects the calls that are occurring in Newberg. As you can see in that upper left-hand corner, this last year we had 2,704 calls. And that was spread out through the entire Newberg area. Kind of walking across the top there, we break this down into the various call types, and you can see by a clear margin, 82% EMS is the highest number of calls. And then as you walk down, you see that we drill down even further to determine where these actual fires and call types are occurring. We track critical calls to determine trends and be able to adjust our training and our performance based on what we're seeing. And then as you go down to the very far left, we actually track even down to the hour, so we can understand, are there peak hours where we need to maybe alter our deployment or understand how that's going to impact us, days of the week. You'll see a 4-year trend towards the right-hand corner there, lower right-hand corner. And we actually saw the calls drop a little bit this year, and we believe that it actually was impacted by COVID. And early on, when people were sheltering in place and didn't want to call 911, they didn't go to the hospital, they remained sheltered. And we think we've not only seen that in Newberg, we've seen that throughout our entire 27 stations. And then the lower right shows a breakdown of station 20 and 21. And then we have responses in from station 35 to the north in King City. And the last thing I'll point out is the map in the upper right, where you see that really bright, vibrant color. That's what we call a heat map. And the brighter the color, the higher the density of calls. So that's kind of where the calls are occurring within Newberg, or the highest population of calls. We opened up a new logistics service center in mid-December. And this was a building that we relocated from our campus that we were in for many years out in Aloha. And this is a very large state-of-the-art facility that houses supply, fleet, facilities, maintenance, and communications. Many of our business processes are much more efficient due to the layout and the technology that we're utilizing in this facility. And we're extremely proud of this new building for us. In the very near future, we're hoping to open up Fire Station 54, which will be in this building. It's actually in a commercial building. This building sits on the corner of Miley Road and I-5, basically adjacent to the Charbonneau community in South Wilsonville. And this will be staffed with firefighters 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It will be 2 firefighters, 1 firefighter and a company officer, and they'll be on a transport capable rescue unit. And we're very anxious to get in there and be able to serve not only the citizens in the community of Charbonneau, but the greater Westland area as well. We recently just had a very large scale outreach campaign as we are recruiting firefighters and firefighter paramedics. This is a picture of one of our firefighters that was instrumental in this campaign, and she did a wonderful job. We're hoping from these efforts that we'll get a really good pool of candidates, and we're hoping to onboard 16 firefighters in February and 6 paramedics. We have a new online tool that you'll see a picture of here that you can actually plug in your individual address, and it will determine whether or not you are in an area that can do backyard burning. or agricultural burning, and it will tell you real time. So no longer will you have to call the phone line or this is very user friendly, and we found that it's been wildly successful for our citizens to be able to understand in real time if they can burn or not. And this is on our website at www.tvfnr.com. In November, we're going to be going out for a bond measure, and there will be more to follow as we near November. Things that we'll be focusing on in our bond will be facility upgrades and increased ability with modern training props at our training facility. Stations will be looking at seismic, equality, and standard upgrades, as well as additional land for future site stations as we understand where growth and demand will be, and then apparatus for our capital replacement schedule. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, folks. All right, Deputy Chief, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions, folks? And I will try to see if I can see the raising of hands. All right. Well, I have one comment for you, Deputy Chief. On your call slide, it noted that the highest number of calls were on Fridays, okay, in Newberg.
Yes.
The other interesting thing is the highest calls on the day of the month is on the 13th. So we better watch out. There may be something about this Friday the 13th thing. I don't know, but I'm just saying. So there you go.
Excellent observation. Yes.
All right. Any questions, folks, for the Deputy Chief? All right. Well, seeing none, thank you very much for your service. Bryce, there you go.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Real
Go
quick
ahead, Bryce.
question, Kenny, thank you for the presentation. I noticed in your slide with the heat map,
Yes.
if I read that correctly, that's the area with a number of townhouses and homes out by the airport. Is that right?
Well, I think that actually might be Providence Newberg Hospital in the surrounding area and some of the facilities there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that was my question is, yeah, where that is, and then in your professional opinion, why that area, because it seemed to be significantly higher than other areas. I saw a couple other blips with red, but I would love to hear how you're making sense of that data.
Well, it's pretty common in all of our areas that we see bright color due to the high call volume at care facilities, and particularly in Newberg, because we do transport. We have inter-hospital facility transports that are commonly scheduled throughout the day. So I think that's why you see such a high call volume there.
Thank you.
You bet.
Muted. Any other questions, folks?
Kenny,
All right.
Can you stop your share, Kenny?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I just wanted to say thank you because working at Providence, I know how much you all have done at TVFNR with vaccines and COVID response, and I think it can go not say thank you enough. So I know the long hours that your team has put in, and they're always really great to work with, and I really, really appreciate all that you do.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. And we certainly appreciate the partnership with all of the staff at the hospital. So thank you.
Well, Deputy Chief, thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, TVFNR gave me my first and second shot, so I'm thankful for that as well. I appreciate it.
Very good.
All right. Otherwise, please stay safe out there. Let all your folks that you work with, please stay safe. And we appreciate your service.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass that along. I appreciate you having me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. All right, Council, that's it for our work session agenda for this evening. We've got a couple ticks. Why don't we come back here at 7 o'clock and we'll get to the business session, if that's okay with everybody. All right. Mute and stop your video, and we'll see you back at 7 o'clock. Anyway. All right. It looks like it's 7 o'clock. This is the City Council business session for May 17th, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order. There's also an agenda in Spanish if you check the city's website. A roll call, please. City Recorder Sue Ryan.
Counselor McBride,
Here.
Counselor Cofield,
Heather.
Hitler, Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Here.
Counselor Martinez Blancarte,
Present.
Mayor Rogers,
Present.
Counselor Bacon,
Here.
Counselor Finley. I thought I saw Stephanie. Yeah, it looks like her.
Sorry, I'm here.
That's okay. It looks like you're in Wi-Fi slow world. Okay, Mr. Mayor, all present.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, the Pledge of Allegiance, please, folks. Let me see if I can get my there it is. There's a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Okay, well, thank you. Let's go on. We are, the first item here is a presentation for Taste Newberg, Visit Newberg's Q3 report. Leslie Caldwell. Good evening, Leslie.
Good evening. How are you this evening?
Just ducky.
Well, thank you, Mayor Rogers, council and staff. I'm pleased to present Taste Newberg's January through March 2021 quarterly report. Next slide, please. So as mentioned 2 weeks ago at the last council meeting, we talked about the mission and purpose of the organization. I just always like to include it in these slides for the record. And thank you for understanding what that mission purpose is. Next slide, please. So our primary asset is our website. In March of last year, we launched the website, and in March of this year, we launched an improved version of the website, which allows for enhanced user experience and backend functionality. So we update the website regularly with fresh content, which includes adding new business listings, blog articles, and events. Our listings also populate on Travel Oregon's website, as well as Willamette Valley Visitors Association, and in some cases, Visit McMinnville. We launched a Willamette Water Trail at Rogers Landing page in partnership with Willamette Valley Visitors Association in this past quarter, and this includes resources for boaters and paddlers. We also wrote 3 blog articles in the quarter focusing on Newberg Truffle Month, as well as spring art blooms in Newberg wine country. We supported 30 industry partner businesses through these initiatives, and we had 11,000 total blog views between web and social. We continue to update our COVID and travel alerts page, which serves to provide visitor resources specific to traveler safety protocols and requirements, as well as guidance on visiting restaurants and wineries and links to state and local resources. Our goal is to provide inspirational and safe travel ideas for Oregonians, as well as to provide evergreen content that Google will index. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we launched some improvements to the website. Here are screen captures of the new site improvements. The hero image now, which is where the pink cherry tree is in bloom. I think it's cherry tree. That now has video and photo carousel capability, where in the past it was just one single image. And we're able to swap that out easily without having to go to a web developer for that work. The search functionality has been greatly improved. It's based on activity versus location, and results are Newberg prioritized while still allowing for results further down the page from other nearby areas. We enhanced the mobile experience as well as keyword search functionality. Next slide, please. So for the quarter, we had over 2,000 unique users to our website, which was down about 10% to prior quarter, while page views totaled 6,053, which was a 12% increase quarter over quarter. So this tells us that content grew in relevance. Our website sessions were down by about 5%, but our average time on site grew by 24% to 1.7 minutes. So we believe that our counts will grow significantly once we are able to generate traffic through paid marketing campaigns and I described that at our annual business plan presentation. So our social media results reflect growth of 26% on Facebook and 15% on Instagram, quarter over quarter. Instagram has more followers than Facebook, but Facebook has more engagements. And we anticipate continued follower growth based on our marketing outreach strategies. Next slide, please. So our social media focus during the quarter included inspiring stories and videos, including our Newberg Truffle Month and Spring Art Blooms in Newberg Wine Country campaigns, as well as new business openings, including Forage, Teeter Totter, and Distaff Wines. We were delighted that Coin 6 featured Spring Art Blooms campaign with interviews of Lonnie Parrish from Art Elements and Bill and Sandy Sanchez from Potter's Vineyard. We boosted some of these Facebook posts based on strength of content and targeted specific demographics to the drive markets in Oregon, depending on travel advisories in place at the time. Next slide, please. So our Newberg Truffle Month generated more than 8,600 Facebook and Instagram likes. Our lodging partners generated a total of 11 hotel room night bookings with a total revenue close to $5,000. We featured 15 Newberg area businesses for this promotional campaign. We're still getting our sea legs on putting lodging packages together, so hopefully we'll see some great results coming up for our next promotion that we include lodging packages. Next slide, please. So we sent out newsletters to tourism industry partners, including information about Travel Oregon small business trainings and state of the travel industry from Travel Oregon. We also included industry-specific COVID relief resources, grant opportunities, as well as Newberg-specific campaigns and new business initiatives. Consumer newsletters were also sent, highlighting Newberg Truffle Month, Spring Art Blooms campaign, Chehalis Cultural Center events and gallery exhibits, outdoor wine tasting offerings and events, and new business openings. We also pushed out information to our lodging and other industry partners to educate them about and invite their participation in our Newberg Lavender Trail promotion, which will be coming up in July. So we are pleased with open rates that are ranging between 42 and 54%, which exceed the industry norm and just tells us that our content is relevant. Next slide, please. So building our image library is a continued work in progress. This past quarter, we focused on capturing images of downtown cityscapes, scenic landscapes, shop interiors and products for our seasonal campaigns, as well as new businesses. We produced 3 videos, which resulted in over 1,500 views on social channels. As of this point, we estimate that we have about 1,500 photos that we've captured since bringing our marketing manager on staff. Next slide, please. So during the quarter, we updated our website media resources page with fresh content and images. This is something that we do quarterly. We include new media coverage that has occurred in the past quarter and update press releases and articles, etc. We distributed press releases about the 2 campaigns that I mentioned previously, which had strong media coverage on point, interviewing Newberg Onion Bistro, the Allison, Honey Pie Pizza, Art Elements, and Potter's Vineyard. We were also featured in WAVA's online blog, in an Oregon Wine Press, Newberg, McMinnville, and Salem newspapers. Area coverage was also secured on AAA Colorado Magazine, 1859 Magazine, and on K2 for One Tank Getaways. One thing that's fun is that Warren D. Rhodes Cycling Tours is experiencing an uptick in bookings from Colorado, and they were featured in the AAA Magazine article. So it's nice to see results of some of this work that we're doing. Next slide, please. So we hosted 3 media visits throughout the quarter with stories in the queue for spring and summer coverage. While most writers are still postponing their visits due to COVID, our total media coverage for June through March is as follows. We've secured 41 articles, 183 million in online readership, 303,000 estimated coverage views, and 3.85 thousand social shares. Next slide, please. So January media coverage had 6 articles mentioning Newberg places as happenings, places or happenings, sorry, including Rex Hill's new multi-million-dollar hospitality center, Sprinkles of Joy Bakery opening, and Newberg Truffle Month, to name a few. Next slide, please. February's 9 media mentions were primarily focused on Newberg Truffle Month. Additionally, Oregon Wine Press featured Good Company Cheese Bar for a story, and then Romance in Luxurious Lodging at the Allison and Chehalem Ridge B&B for another article. Other broadcast reporting or article themes included sparkling wines, A to Z Wineworks Artisan Residence Program, and again, the One Tank Getaways. Next slide, please. For March media coverage, it ranged from articles about Alcine celebrating their 50 years to Oregon Pinot Noirs. The balance of articles provided great coverage of Taste Newberg's Spring Art Blooms promotion with mentions of 12 Newberg businesses. And you'll see a picture there of Distaff Wines, which is out by the airport. If you haven't had a chance to visit, it's a great spot right across from Caravan Coffee. Next slide, please. So this chart tracks City of Newberg receipts for lodging tax revenue per quarter. January through March receipts were down 40% to the city's projections and down 24% year over year. Total receipts were 109,000 compared to a record year in 2019, which was $175,000. Contributing to this shortfall was that the Allison was only allowing 49% of its rooms to be available for stays due to labor shortages. Vacation rentals appear to be performing stronger than the hotels, but some of the inventory has been taken off market or rented for long-term stays, which doesn't contribute to the TLT. And the disappointing news was that Q3 revenues for Taste Newberg totaled just $19,000, down $25,000 from anticipated TLT revenue. Fortunately, we were able to secure a second draw PPP loan in the amount of $26,000, which helped fill that, which will help fill that shortfall. That was funded in May. The Allison advised last week that due to severe staff recruiting challenges, they will only offer 70% of their guest rooms for weekend stays and 20% capacity availability on weekdays through the summer. To approximate 32% occupancy, they run full to their limited capacity. This will definitely have a serious impact on TLT payments for this current fiscal year Q4 and next year's Q1. We are working on assisting with staffing solutions, but this is a widespread challenge that many businesses are currently facing, which I'm sure you've all heard. Our primary goal of growing leisure visitor volume in overnight stays continues to be COVID challenge. Next slide, please. The partnerships and collaboration. After engagement with our state, regional, and county DMO teams, we received and delivered COVID-specific resource information as well as marketing-related training to help our tourism industry partners grow their businesses. We're collaborating with Oregon Agritourism Partnership, OSU Extension Office, and Visit McMinnville on the National Farm Week, with the goal of creating digital and print guides for agriculture-focused tourist itineraries. Our WAVA Race, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force continues to meet with committee work currently focused on an RDE&I toolkit that will roll out in 2021, hopefully in the next couple months, tailored to industry partners and GMOs for training and education purposes. We've also had recent dialogue with consulting companies about pay equity and inclusion in tourism resources. Next slide, please.
You know, we're getting a fair amount of feedback. I'm not sure why exactly, but I think everybody's pretty much muted. So sorry, Leslie.
Well, it's not me. So we connect regularly with the Willamette Valley Wineries Association to stay current about winery events, promotions, marketing strategies, COVID challenges. There's quite a lot of chatter last week, for example, on how people were going to how they were handling the whole CDC mask guidance versus the state of Oregon mask guidance, and whether they were going to ask for vaccination proof or not. So that's going to be an interesting conversation going forward. The Amherst County Tourism Partnership, our volunteer group voted to disband based on lack of support from the Amherst County Board of Commissioners. And we instead will have Linda and Newberg PMOs representing the Amherst County Tourism Initiative with regards to non-profit association.
Yeah, Leslie, it's really hard to hear. I don't know. Well, I don't think it's just me given the chat. So hold on 1 second. Let me just see. Yeah, it looks like everybody else is muted. So we're just having technological difficulties apparently.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do.
That's better. That actually sounds better now.
Okay. I muted it and unmuted it and turned up the volume. So how's that? Better?
That sounds better.
Yay. Okay, so wrapping up that slide, I wrote letters of support for the Chamber, the Downtown Coalition, and also the Newberg Farmhouse for South Oregon COVID relief grant. Unfortunately, none of those were funded, which was a disappointment for us. Next slide, please. So now to the budget page. Taste Neighbor's total revenue in the third fiscal quarter was $52,000. $26,000 of that came from TLT revenue, which that would be the October-December payment for the TLT, because it doesn't post until when we actually receive those funds. We also received $26,000 in PPP first draw loan funds in the first quarter. We continue to keep a tight rein on expenses. The most expensive and most significant expense line items in the quarter were the payroll, public relations, and the website. Advertising and digital marketing campaign expenses remained on hold during this quarter for the most part until the final quarter of this fiscal year. And we'll be watching that closely based on how the revenues are coming in. So the city's fiscal year TLT revenue projections are $617,000 for the year, which is an increase of 8.7% to budget. Taste Newberg's total revenue share would equate to $141,000 based on these projections. As stated in our annual budget presentation last council meeting, we will watch numbers closely and calibrate program expenses as appropriate. It's very difficult to know what to anticipate with this news from the Allison. So that's going to be a lot of number crunching that I'll be doing. So I'm open to questions now.
All right, folks, if you have any questions, raise your hands and I will, there we go. All right. Well, not seeing any. Going once, going twice, going sold. 3 sold. Leslie, thank you very much. Thank you for all your good works and keep putting heads in beds, right? That's what we need here. So thank you, right? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for your attention today.
Okay, thank you. All right, item number 5 on our agenda. This is the city manager's report. City manager Dan Weinheimer.
So I'll try and be brief. Wanted to touch on COVID as I seem to always do. And, you know, really, I think, reflect a little bit on the vaccination rate that we're at, given the governor's sort of put out information that we can move the county's risk level down if we get 65% of our residents 16 and older vaccinated. I think we're currently at about 53%, just shy of 53%. So a little bit of room to reach that number. And that's folks who've received 1 dose of the vaccine to this point. You know, also we're dealing with the CDC guidance change and a little bit of, you know, sort of trying to figure out what to do with that, I guess, in the sense that certainly vaccinated folks being provided the ability to not wear a mask indoors and outdoors is great for those who are vaccinated. It creates a lot of confusion and questions for us, for folks who aren't vaccinated, who might be taking advantage of that opportunity. And at this point, I've given the guidance to staff to, you know, really to avoid confrontations with folks, but also I think we're going to maintain wearing masks and ask patrons and visitors to wear masks for the time being until we have clearer guidance from the state. The state has indicated that the governor has said that she supports the CDC's move, but there haven't been details on that. And so I think we're looking for implementation guidance before we make dramatic moves, just given the fact that, this whole thing has been a bit of a yo-yo back and forth on things, and just trying to maintain a level of information that actually has some consistency and continuity for our public and for our staff. Just trying to encourage people to, meet the intent of that and get vaccinated. And so hopefully that'll be the case. And, certainly, again, just wanting to avoid confrontations with individuals, will respect and respectfully offer masks to folks who come into the city facilities, but, just trying to make sure that we both maintain our services and maintain the health of our staff and the patrons who enter our facilities at the same time. Just a couple other quick things. As you all know, we finished the budget committee work on May 4th. We did receive the ARPA, that's the American Rescue Plan Act, guidance from the Treasury Department on the 10th. And so 151 pages of that to digest. But, in essence, I think we've got a good amount of leeway for coming up with programmatic ideas to spend the money that we're being allocated. We've not yet received the money. I would expect probably in about a month we might receive it, in which case, we're working diligently on some options, some criteria for how to spend that money, and also some ideas within those options. So hopefully we'll shortly, after receiving the money, be able to come back and really set up a dialogue. We talked about using the budget committee. We'd still plan on doing that, and try to open it up as well for some comments from the public, both about ideas we have, but also soliciting ideas on how we might spend the money. So more to come, definitely a lot more to come with that as we go. Did also want to point out, I issued an RFP, a request for proposals, for strategic planning facilitation that will close June 10th. And so I've got a fair number of folks reaching out to me interested in providing a proposal. So that's heartening. The deadline being what it is, I'm not sure we'll know for about a month as to who actually does propose, but we'll see how that goes, and would definitely include counselors in review of the proposals we received. So the intent being, sort of the policy conversations we've talked about in the budget committee, along with some of the long-term implementation strategies as well. Lastly, it is a Monday and it was exciting. It's COVID. It's just stuff happens. We apparently had some city maintenance crews were working outside the annex, the archives annex here adjacent to City Hall, and accidentally struck a gas line that was not marked. We do locates and do all those things. So we had a bit of an exciting morning with, some fire activity. Luckily, no active fire, but fire personnel blocking off the streets, and some of our staff getting evacuated for a few hours into other office space. And luckily, nothing catastrophic happened. But given the fact that it's downtown and there was lights and sirens, or at least lights, wanted to let folks know what that was. The Northwest Naturals folks came in and were able to do some emergency repairs, and it seems like, at least for now, that's stable. And so some entertainment, I suppose, some another sort of what is that kind of panic on a Monday morning. But anywho, I will also get the rest of this report published. We've got some great photos from the activity from our Public Works Department, about 15 pages worth of reports from staff. So there's plenty to read and catch up with. But moving on our agenda, we'll leave it there. So thank you.
All right, any questions for the city CEO? Oh, seeing none. All right. Next, on to public comments. And I think, Sue, we do have a public comment from Mr. Robert Suppry regarding street seating.
Correct. So this is from Robert Suppy to the council. I wanted to raise what I think is a significant safety issue that isn't addressed in Newberg's formal NMC, he means municipal code, or informal rules. Do you consider acceptable that a property owner can erect a horizontal barrier over a public sidewalk that interferes with pedestrian traffic? Apparently that's allowed in Newberg. If it were a tree, it would be required to have at least 8 feet in vertical clearance. If it were a sign, there are other height regulations. Sorry, I lost my place. That apply. If it is not a sign, according to my email conversation with Doug Rux, we don't regulate it. A specific example of this is the canopy that was erected over the street seat on Edward Street, just south of First Street. The canopy converts the outdoor dining area into an indoor dining area and sits partly in the street and partly on the sidewalk. We don't appear to have regulations about such a structure. It's not part of the street seat, as those by Newberg's definition are in the street. The horizontal bar is set 6 feet above the sidewalk. That's an impediment for many pedestrians. With our lack of regulations, there's nothing to prevent the bars to have been at, say, 4 feet height. I'm assuming that there was a good reason that the Newberg Municipal Code doesn't allow such an impediment if it is caused by a tree branch or sign. I would think that the same reason should apply to a rigid metal bar. I raised this issue to code enforcement months ago, and the only response I received was the generic auto response. I communicated with Doug Rux about this 2 months ago. He did clarify the lack of regulations, but the obstacle remained. I observed today that the canopy has been removed and that the street seat is an outdoor dining area again. I suspect it occurred within the last week. While the immediate problem has gone away, my concern is that there is nothing to stop this from coming back here or elsewhere. Does it seem reasonable to allow any property owner to erect a barrier across a public sidewalk as long as it's not a sign or a tree? I don't think it is, and hope that the council agrees and will take action on it. Thank you for your consideration of my concerns. Robert Suppy.
All right. Thank you, Sue. All right. Any comments regarding Mr. Suppy's letter? All right. We will, I'm sure we will discuss it at some later point. But I did notice, I went by today and any barriers are gone. It's strictly in the street now. So, okay. All right. Moving along, item 7A. This is the consent calendar. If I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Bryce with a second. All right. All in favor signify by raising your left hands. And unanimous, Sue. All righty, next, on to public hearings. This is item 8A. All right, I will warn you, this is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. So we don't do these very often. So we are going to rely heavily on our city attorney, James Walker. So here we go. This is ordinance 2021-2875, an ordinance approving a health hazard annexation of a 0.41 acre property plus 9,000 square feet of area of the adjacent right-of-way into the city of Newberg and change the zoning from Yamhill County VLDR1, very low density residential, to Newberg R1, low density residential for property located at 700 Northeast Camellia Drive, tax lot R320-7AA-00600. All right, so we're now opening the public hearing. That was the purpose. The testimony procedure will be, we'll hear from the staff report. We'll then have public testimony, proponents and any opponents if there are, and then a rebuttal from the principal proponent. And then we'll have questions from the floor of the city council, and then public agency letters of support, and then we'll close testimony. All right, so there we are. First, let me call for abstentions, bias, ex parte contact, and objections to jurisdiction. All right, seeing none or hearing none, I now believe it's time for the city attorney legal announcements. Hello,
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rogers. Certain announcements are required before the commencement of a quasi-judicial land use hearing. This hearing deals with the land use decision on a health hazard annexation of property located at 700 Northeast Camellia Drive and 9,000 square feet of Northeast Camellia Drive right-of-way adjacent to the subject property. The announcement required by the Oregon Revised Statutes, ORS 197.763, is as follows. 1, the applicable substantive criteria for the decision are listed in the staff report under Exhibit C to Ordinance Number 2021-2875, which begins on page 9 of the RCA ordinance attached to the council agenda. 2, testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described above or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation that you believe applies to this decision. 3, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. And 4, failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The applicant, who has the burden of proof, may have at least 7 days after the record is closed to submit final written argument. At the close of the testimony portion of the hearing, the applicant will have to decide if the applicant wishes to submit further written argument. Pertinent definitions are found under ORS 197.763 subsection 9. They are as follows. Argument means assertions and analysis regarding the satisfaction or violation of legal standards or policy believed relevant by the proponent to a decision. Argument does not include facts. And B, evidence. Evidence means facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or non-compliance with the standards believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. Any submission by the applicant must be limited to argument. No additional evidence can be submitted. If the applicant wishes to make final written argument, no further deliberation shall take place tonight. If the applicant waives that right, the council may proceed with deliberation. Mayor Rogers, that concludes the legal announcements for the commencement of this quasi-judicial land use hearing.
Thank you, James. All right, I think we are now ready for the staff report. Patrick Davenport, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Walker, for that introduction. So this is an annexation quasi-judicial for 700 Northeast Camellia Drive and an adjacent segment of right-of-way. The city file number is ANX 21-0001. And please allow me to introduce the staff report into the official record. Thank you. Next slide, please, Sue. Okay, just as some quick background for you. This request is a public health hazard annexation. So the relationship is a failing drain field and the applicant wishes to connect to city sewer. So again, this is an annexation of 0.41 acre or about 17,859 square feet and about a 9,000 square foot segment of Camellia Drive. The proposal was to annex it into the city limits and change the zoning from Yamhill County very low density residential, 1 acre minimum, to equivalent Newberg zoning, R1 low density residential. The criteria and staff are in my staff report, and the Planning Commission held a hearing on April 8th and recommended approval of the request per resolution 2021-369. Next slide, please. Here's a few location maps for you that include zoning. So the one on the left is an overview. You can see it's in the far north section of our city. On the right is a zoomed in version. You can see that's the subject property is located adjacent to the intersection of Northeast Terrace Drive and Northeast Camellia Drive. And Terra Estates Phase 1 is the city subdivision to the west of Terrace Drive. Next slide, please. Here's a shot of our comprehensive plan map showing the designation of the subject property as low density residential. You can see the little red arrow there. Next slide, please. Here is another image of the tax map with the subject property with the red star. Next slide, please. This is an image of the subdivision plat that was recorded in the 1950s. And again, the subject property is Lot 2, indicated by the orange star on the slide. Next slide, please. Here's an image of our city utilities. We have water lines on both frontages of the subject property. There's the city sewer line is going up the center, roughly the center line of Northeast Terrace. The property is served by a community water system. And again, the applicant wishes to connect to the city sewer that you can see in the center of Northeast Terrace Drive. Next slide, please. Okay, there's an 15.250.020 are the conditions for annexation. All the conditions are met, indicating that the subject property is inside the urban growth boundary and contiguous to the existing city limits. And the legal description includes the adjacent right-of-way. Next slide, please. Again, this request complies with the comprehensive plan, which we've already mentioned. What the proposed zoning will be is R1, low density residential. Next slide, please. And here we have an indication that an adequate level of urban services are available currently. So again, the request is to connect to sewer, but water is available. The same with police, fire, parks, and schools. Next slide, please. And the conditions of approval, there were no changes from the Planning Commission hearing. So I'll briefly summarize those. The Northeast Terrace Drive and Northeast Camellia Drive rights-of-way dedication topic. That is conditioned to prior to applying for connection to the City of Newberg sanitary sewer system. The owner must dedicate additional rights-of-ways along the property frontages of Terrace Drive and Camellia Drive to provide for 28 feet of right-of-way from the road center line. And also a non-remonstrance agreement for public improvements along Terrace and Camellia are also required prior to connecting to the city's sanitary sewer system. So that agreement is required to be prepared and recorded prior to the connection. And that non-remonstrance agreement is summarized but not limited to a 9-foot travel lane, a 7-foot parking lane, a 1/2 foot curb, 5.5-foot planter strip, and a 5-foot sidewalk, as well as if there's any street trees, street lighting, or any other public services. On the connection to the water supply, since the applicant is already connected to the community water supply, upon formal notice by the city manager, the applicant would have 180 days to connect to the city water system at the discretion of the city manager. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's about to conclude my staff report, but our recommendation is to move to adopt City Council Ordinance 2021-2875 with the supporting language, as you can see here on my slide and in the staff report. And that's concludes my staff report. And I'd like to note that an applicant's representative is also present on this call if you would like to ask some questions of Ms. Kane. Otherwise, I would happy to answer any of council's questions. Thank you.
All right, well, let's go to public testimony, including good evening, Jessica Kane. Good evening. Would you like to add anything at this point as a part of public testimony?
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. We concur with staff's recommendation. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. All right, so any questions, folks, for staff or for Ms. Kane? Not seeing it. One question I got. Oops, so there we go. I have one question. I assume that this is the cost of this is borne by the property owner, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, folks? All right, moving on. Do we have any public letters, agency letters or comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, we have not received any public testimony for this item.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to close the public testimony and now city attorney legal announcements, please.
All right, thank you, Mayor Rogers. At this time, I'll ask Ms. Kane if you will waive the 7-day timeline to submit a final written argument in support of the application.
Yes, we waive our right to submit written argument.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kane. And post-hearing announcements, a couple of them. If the decision is not made tonight and continued to another date, the record could be reopened at that later date by motion of the council. Therefore, do not assume no further evidence will be taken. If the decision is made tonight, the council has the authority to reconsider the decision following proper procedure. This motion to reconsider is usually required to be made at the next meeting of the city council. The fact that the council could reconsider their decision does not affect the length of time for appeal of that decision. That concludes the attorney comments and announcements.
Thank you. Final recommendation from staff then, please. Patrick?
My recommendation is move to adopt the ordinance, Mr. Mayor, as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, deliberation, folks. Any other discussion? Any other questions? All right. All right, action by the city council. Why don't we, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I
Steph.
move that we adopt ordinance 2021-2875.
All right.
Second.
And the second was,
But you've got to, Mr. Mayor. Oh, go ahead, Doug. I know we're going to the same place.
The first would be a motion if you want to waive the second reading, and then you would go to the motion for the adoption.
I got to put that on my notes because I always forget that. All right, let's start with that motion. Stephanie, I'd be greatly obliged.
Oh, sorry, was I on mute?
Yes.
Sorry, I move that we waive the second reading.
Second.
And Mike with a second. I got you that time. All right. All in favor of waiving the second reading, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we have waived the second reading. Now I will entertain a motion. Stephanie.
All right, thank you. I move that we adopt ordinance 2021-2875.
Read by title.
Read by title only. Thank you.
Nice assist. All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Bryce with a second. All right. Any further discussion? And this time, let's all in favor signify by raising your left hands.
Or I'll, Mayor,
No.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to read the
You better,
read by title only.
read by title only. Dang it.
In front of the council for approval is ordinance number 2021-2875, an ordinance approving a health hazard annexation of a 0.41 acre property plus 9,000 square feet of area of the adjacent right-of-way into the city of Newberg, and change the zoning from Yamhill County VLDR-1 to Newberg R-1 low density residential for property located at 700 Northeast Camellia Drive, tax lot R3207 AA-00600.
Mr. Mayor, do you want me to start the roll call vote?
A roll call vote would be delightful. Thank you.
Councillor McBride,
Yes.
Councillor Cofield,
Yes.
Councillor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Councillor Martinez Plancarte,
Yes.
Mayor Rogers,
Yes.
Councillor Bacon,
Yes.
Councillor Finley.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, ordinance 2021-2875 passes unanimously.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. And Jessica, thank you very much. I told you we don't do these often, and we showed it, or at least I showed it anyway. But anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We are now on item 8B on your program. There it is, Vertical Housing Development Zone. And I believe Keith Leonard is presenting on this one, being a legislative hearing. This hearing is now called to order. Do I have any declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions? All right, hearing none. Let's go on to the.
I found this on the web.
Okay, let's go on to the staff report. Good evening, Keith.
I need to promote him. My bad. I'm sorry. I was keeping him corralled on the other side, so this is entirely my fault. Okay. All right, now you should see him. Sorry about that.
That was refreshing. It was your fault and not mine for a change. So
I think you have a higher score.
There I am. Okay. So my name's Keith Leonard. I'm an associate planner here with the city of Newberg. And I'm here to present the vertical housing development zone that we've been working on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the introduction. And I'd like to enter my staff report and all the exhibits and attachments into the public record. Next slide, please. Okay, so where does this all come from? The downtown improvement plan talks about creating very great downtown. Lots of people living down there, playing, eating, working. And one of the things that this plan does is provide us with a number of economic development tools for our toolbox and suggestions for those that we should look into. And the vertical housing development zone was one of those, and that's on page 54 and 55 of the downtown improvement plan. Next slide, please. So the vertical housing development zone program is authorized by state statute. It enables the cities or counties to negotiate a 10-year partial tax exemption with the taxing jurisdictions or the districts. And these districts can either be one parcel or one lot or multiple tax lots. So in the case of the Newberg program is going to encompass the C3 zone property and also M2 zone property within the downtown improvement plan boundary. Next slide, please. So why support one of these things? Well, we want to have a healthy central business district, as every city does. And we want to encourage mixed use in the downtown. Mixed use buildings are a good complement to every downtown. More commercial growth in the central business district is good for the overall county tax base. Increased live work opportunities, having people that can walk out their door and get food or go to work. That's what we're looking for. And it supports the existing businesses. The additional numbers of people living in the downtown generally are going to spin off. They're going to go out and spend the money in the downtown. And it creates long-term community wealth. These buildings tend to be around, they tend to do pretty well. And then after the abatement's done, there's an increase in the taxes that would be collected by the taxing jurisdictions. And finally, we want to have a walkable downtown, and having the residents right downtown where they can walk to the services it's a planner thing. We all like it. I think most people do. Next slide, please. So for market rate units, there's a tax break that's given on the building. So first floor has to be commercial, and that first floor is fully taxed. For each additional floor above that commercial, you get 20%. So one floor, 20%, 2 floors of residential, 40, 3, 60, and the maximum is 80% with 4 floors. Next slide, please. There's also an affordable housing component to this. For this, it applies to a partial tax abatement on the land, the value of the land. It requires 80% of the area median income or below for the residents within these areas. They're checked annually to make sure that they're still meeting those requirements. And then we're back to the same 1 floor residential, 20%, 2 floors, 40%, 3, 64, 80. The difference is that this is on the land. So if you had an affordable housing project, you'd have a developer that's looking at not only the building, but also a land temporary abatement. Next slide, please. And here's the boundary. So we're going to start up by Sheridan Street, and it follows the railroad track down. It goes down South Harrison Street, and then there's an alley kind of juts through. It hits South Grant Street, and then it catches the frontage lots along 2nd Street. There is a small area along East 3rd that juts out a little bit between Edwards and College. Then we're over to River Street. That's the eastern boundary. It goes back up to Hancock, up Meridian, across Sheridan, back down to Hancock from Edwards, and then it catches the frontage, majority of the front, well, all the frontage along East Hancock Street. There's a little area that does jut out a little bit. I believe that's probably the annex. And then it goes up through an alley, and we're back up to Sheraton Street. And this is an area within the downtown improvement plan. Again, it's not the entire downtown improvement plan. It's the C3 and the M2 zone property. Next slide, please. And we had Leland Consulting do a displacement analysis, and part of this was that they looked at developable sites within the entire downtown improvement plan area. So they came up with a tiered system, a tier 1 being the most developable and tier 3 being the least developable. There's about 4.7 acres, if I remember right, it's behind my thing, of developable property that Leland had determined was within the downtown there. Next slide, please. So with the displacement analysis, this is a requirement of the revised statute. Every community has to do one of these before they establish a vertical housing development zone. And the reason for this, we want to make sure that this program doesn't start pushing out people who already live here. So the findings that Leland provided back to us was that there was a very low likelihood of displacement occurring with existing residents in the downtown area. Next slide, please. We also had to look at a model. So we looked at the Union Block. Get something. Sorry about that. I got something that popped right up in my screen. There we go. So we looked at 614 East 1st Street. This is indeed a true mixed-use building. You have commercial on the 1st floor and you have residential on the 2nd floor. Next slide, please. We had to make some assumptions when we built this model. So this is a newly constructed building, even though it's already there, but we're looking at it as new. We utilized the 2019 real market values. And for the building, that came out to be about $1.68 million. The real market value for the land, about $278,000. And for this model, we are going to be looking at market rate units, assuming a 3% increase in the assessed value. And then Yamhill County doesn't differentiate between commercial and residential use. So in a 2-story building, they take the value of that building and basically split it. So we did the same thing for our model. Next slide, please. So here's what's going to happen to the city of Newberg if we get one of these buildings built and in terms of taxes. So with a 2-story, here we are at 20% temporary tax abatement, building valued at about $1.6 million. Estimated tax collected with abatement for years 1 through 10, $32,000, almost $33,000. Estimated tax abatement for years 1 through 10, this is what the city would be giving up for that period of time, $6,700. And then the estimated tax collected for years 11 through 20, these are kind of the kicker years where the abatement is no longer in effect, $53,469. Next slide, please. Oh, wait, let's stay there. 3-story model. Here we are at 40% partial tax abatement. We have 2 stories above the 1st floor commercial. Buildings valued at about $2.5 million. Estimated tax still collected with the abatement would still be $36,000. The total abated tax for years 1 through 10, what we'd be giving up would be $20,000. And then the estimated tax collected for years 11 through 20, the kicker years, would be about $76,000. Next slide, please. For a 4-story, we're at 60% partial tax, temporary tax abatement, a building value about $3.3 million. Estimated tax collected with abatement for years 1 through 10 would still be $32,000, almost $33,000. Estimated tax for years 1 through 10 would be $40,000. That would be what would be abated. And then the estimated tax collected for years 11 through 20 would be about $99,000. And for a 5-story building, here we're at the maximum abatement amount, $4.2 million building, estimated tax collected with abatement for years 1 through 10, about $22,000, almost $23,000. And then the estimated tax abated for years 1 through 10, what the city would be giving up would be about $68,000. And then the total tax for the kicker years, we'd be seeing about $121,000, almost $122,000 coming into the city for taxes. Next slide, please. So we also looked at this model, what the overall effect would be on the taxing districts, what they would be giving up. So if we had 1-floor residential, you'd be looking, or the taxing districts would be giving up about $39,000, 219,000, 238,000, and 4 stories of residential, $397,000. Next slide, please. And we have some good news. So hats off to Patrick because he was there at the meetings as well. We went on the road and we did presentations to all the taxing districts and all of them bought into it. So that use of terms, but they're supporting the program. So they will give up their taxes for any development we get within that area that was delineated. And next slide, please. The findings are related to the Oregon revised statutes. So with 1A, we designated the district. That was the map that I described. 4, we gave the chance for the taxing districts to opt out. None of them opted out. And then for 6A, B, and C, this has to do with the notice and what has to go into the notice. So we sent out these notices on 2/9/21. And then we had some follow-up meetings with taxing districts. And then 7A, that's why we're here tonight. You have to have at least 60 days in which you're beyond delivering that letter to the jurisdictions or the taxing districts, and we're at day 97. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'll come back to the recommendation after the meeting goes on a little bit here.
All right, Sue, have we received any public testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we have not received any public testimony for ordinance 2021-2879, nor is there anyone signed up to speak for public comment.
Okay, we will close public testimony. All right, the recommendation from staff, Keith.
So the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, is to adopt ordinance number 2021-2879, an ordinance establishing a vertical housing development zone and creating chapter 3.5 in the Newberg Municipal Code.
All right, any questions of staff, folks? All right, a question, I guess, Keith, is, where these have been done in other communities, I mean, how successful has it been? I mean, it looks like if you're putting only 1 story of residential, you're not getting a lot of an abatement. So, I mean, how successful have they been?
So you've seen some success, and I hate to mention it, but up in the Portland metro area, that's where you find a lot of these, Tigard, Beaverton. A lot of them have other funding mechanisms that go along with it, for instance, urban renewal. In fact, the taxing dollars, because of the area that we're talking about, those dollars would then go to the urban renewal, I believe. And so there has been success in the Portland metro area. I think that we will be the first city within Yamhill County to have this program. So yeah, it works, but there's usually some other incentives that go along with the program. It's not a do it all.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Keith, folks? All right, seeing none, let's close council. Go ahead, Mike.
So just quick question. Did the city, did we just never had this type of a zone in there? Because wouldn't that new building that was built down on 2nd Street, that would fit this, correct? So I guess I'm trying to understand. It seemed like that we never had this ordinance, and so how did that get built? So what are we actually doing here?
Keith, you want me to try that one?
If you would like, sure.
Okay. So the building was actually built on 2nd Street. Let me back up to some history. So I've been talking with developers about doing redevelopment on 2nd Street. And 2nd Street in our downtown plan is a location to provide additional housing. In talking with developers, they were looking for what kind of incentive packages do you have in order to help them build their projects. And at that time, I had to tell them we don't have any. So this particular developer and his other investors, they chose to move forward. We also changed some regulations because what they built under our old regulations, you couldn't build what's there today because we had all this commercial frontage requirement. So what they've got is a live work unit on a corner. So actually that building would not qualify as it's constructed for this program. But that developer made his pro forma worked out to be able to do that one. Now we had another building that was built up off of Hancock. It's a 2-story building. And that one, if this program would have been in place and they've got the residential on the 2nd floor, which is now long-term rental units, they could have applied and qualified for this. And then I'm going to kind of go to where I think the mayor might ask is like, oh, we've got a construction excise tax. Yes. So you start to put these packages together to say, oh, we've got the vertical housing. You can get a partial tax abatement. You've got the construction excise tax where we could invest in units or in infrastructure to help that project pencil out. If they use construction excise tax, though their tax abatement would end after 10 years, and it gets reviewed every year to make sure they're keeping in qualification, the affordability provision would run for 60 years. And then we're having the conversations about urban renewal, which is another infrastructure component. And when you get to that, you'll see there's a bunch of water lines in the north-south streets to address those deficiencies we've identified, because you can't build the multi-story buildings because you don't have big enough water lines. So all these different pieces go together, Councilor. And so we're whittling away at them one by one. So we've done some zoning things. Now we're on the vertical housing and we've done the construction excise tax.
Other questions or comments, folks? Sounds like more tools in the proverbial toolbox, which is good. So anyway, any other deliberation, folks? Okay, so we have a staff recommendation. I will entertain a motion. Stephanie, you could go clean sweep if you go for this one.
I'll do it. Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2021-2879.
Well, let's, if I could interject, let's waive the second reading. Well, I see everyone shaking their heads like they know. So yes, let's roll it back and do the second reading.
Thank you. As you can tell by the bags under my eyes, last night was late. So yes, I move that we waive the second reading on this.
We have a second. Denise with a second. All right, all in favor, raise your left hands. All right, we have waived the second reading and now a motion.
Yes, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2021-2879. I don't think this is a read by title only. Am I right about that?
You got head nods. Nicely done. We have a second.
Second.
Second, Jules with a second. All right. All in favor? I'm going to do a roll call vote. Sue, if we could.
It would be my pleasure, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor McBride.
Yes.
Councillor Cofield.
Yes.
Councillor Yarnell Holloman.
Yes.
Councillor Martinez Plancarte.
Yes.
Mayor Rogers.
Yes.
Councillor Bacon.
Yes.
Councillor Findlay.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, ordinance 2021-2879 passes unanimously 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we're
Everybody
on
have a
to
good
new
night.
business. Now we're on item 9A, direction on urban growth boundary expansion. Mr. Rux.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux. So you've had 5 PowerPoints this evening. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. I'm going to have a conversation. So we've been doing a lot of work, as you are aware, because we've been bringing that material before you. So we did our housing needs analysis. We did our economic opportunities analysis, and we did our public, semi-public land need analysis. And you've accepted all 3 of those particular documents. Now, all of these things all fit together. You may not have necessarily realized that we were bringing them to you one by one, but they are a fabric. Think of them as putting together a quilt. And so we're looking at a 20-year horizon between 2021 and 2041. And just to hit a few of the highlights about what our housing needs analysis told us is that based upon Portland State University's Population Research Center, our population is projected to increase by almost 8,000 people over the course of the next 20 years. And that's assuming an occupancy of 2.61 people or persons per household and assuming a 5.5% vacancy rate. And we know vacancies are pretty low out there. Housing market is tight. What that means based upon that population growth is that we're going to need close to 3,200 new dwelling units over that 20-year period. And about 1,900 of those dwelling units would be detached single-family homes. The balance would be other types of housing. In that, we've looked at, we factored in accessory dwelling units. We looked at, additional 100 units in the downtown area. So the vertical housing is one of those tools to help get to that 100 units in the downtown. The summary of that HNA essentially says this: we have a surplus of 31 acres of low density residential land. We have a deficiency of 37 acres of medium density and a deficiency of 44 acres for high density. So numbers say over 20 years to accommodate that population for that number of dwelling units, you don't have enough land supply. Question kept coming up when we were doing the HNA about, well, there were 2 pieces. One is, well, what about all this middle housing that's going on for duplexes and tries and so forth? And I've had a lot of conversations with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And in the HNA, it was an option to factor that or consider that. I've had my consultants run some quick numbers. And if you take the 3% that's used in House Bill 2001, it's 57 units over 20 years. It's, again, it's what we were saying when we were going through the HNA work, it's a drop in the bucket. But I'm going to have the consultants go back and put that information in our HNA just so it answers that question for those who have been asking it. So then we move on to the EOA. And what it tells us is that we have 21 gross acres of excess or surplus of commercial land. Once we factor in the public, semi-public, we actually end up with a net of 18-acre surplus of commercial land. In our EOA, it identified there would be a little over 4,400 new jobs anticipated over the course of the next 20 years. And so a little over 2,400 of those are in industrial, 1,800 would be in office and commercial, and about 120 in retail. And in that office and commercial, it includes healthcare. And so that's why you see a bigger number than what you do just for the general retail. You know, our wages are a little bit higher than Yamhill County as a whole, so we're about $43,299. There were some recommendations that came out of the EOA, and one is to continue to implement the economic development strategy. It noted the redevelopment of the mill site, which is owned by CDC, Commercial Development Company. It identified implementing that riverfront master plan because it is a mix for employment and housing. It identified, if you're looking for incentive opportunities, an urban renewal program. We already have an enterprise zone program in our industrial areas off to the south, so that's in place. And we've got a federal opportunity zone designation in that census tract, which is basically south of downtown over to Springbrook Road down to the river. With our industrial land, the EOA made a recommendation that we should come up with measures to preserve our industrial land for sites that are larger than 10 acres. That's been a history in Newberg as we've converted industrial land to non-industrial uses. And here we are deficient in industrial land, but at the same time, we're also deficient in residential land. There were some other recommendations that came out of that for an economic improvement or business district in the downtown, parking management plan for the downtown area, land assemblage, reducing cost of development, regulatory streamlining is another word for that, SDCs, which is a topic that the city council is already discussing. So in the EOA, there's an identified deficiency of 152 acres, but then you add in the 12 acres that are needed for public and semi-public uses. And so all of a sudden we're right at 165 acres deficient on the industrial side. So in the public, semi-public, what was identified over that 20-year period is a need for 120 acres, a little over 120 acres of public and semi-public land. That's park land, that's land that the city may need for its infrastructures like, you know, water booster pump stations. You may remember it's the transit needs some land for a bus. It also includes additional land for faith-based, for additional churches to accommodate the growing population. So with all of that, then you start to look and say, okay, well, what do we do? And there was an attachment 7 that was in your packet. And I think it's a really telling graphic because that's the one that shows where the resource lands, the urban reserve areas, and the exception lands are at in Newberg. And what you see from that particular graphic is that over on our east side, a lot of resource land. It's in the brown color. And you've got some little splotches of yellow, which is exception lands. But then there's some of that exception lands, you have to go through resource land to get to it. And we ran into a pilot project. We were trying to work with DLCD and we couldn't get through the resource land. So we couldn't make the application. If you look up north, we've got an urban reserve and I'll get into some of the details on that. But once you get north of Bell Road, you've got some exception lands, but you got steep slopes. And then up at the northeast quadrant of Newberg, you've got some more resource land. So that's off of Chehalem Drive. And it's when you get down to Highway 240 and you kind of get south of Highway 99 down to Dayton Road, you've got a bunch of exception land. But it's all highly parcelized. Some of it is older farmstead, some of it is, you know, newer housing that has gone in. So for Newberg, it's a challenge of what do you do when you have all of this resource land around you and your exception land has been highly parcelized. Well, there are some things that we can look at. So in your RCA, I started to kind of outline some possibilities, and we're not looking for any kind of direction this evening, just kind of setting the stage. So you're all at the dinner table and I wasn't ready for you and I'm still putting out the silverware and the plates and the water glasses and all of that. So we're going to have a couple of discussions before the council can kind of coalesce about what direction you want us to go through. So on the residential side, there's kind of 3 scenarios, and each one of these scenarios includes land efficiency components. So one of those is that we could do comprehensive plan and zone changes to lands that are already within our urban growth boundary to try to address that. The next one is, well, we could address part of that deficiency with comprehensive plan and zone changes within the UGB and do an urban growth boundary expansion. And kind of your third option, and I'm sure there will be others, is that you don't do any of this comp plan zone change within the UGB and you just look at doing an urban growth boundary expansion. Same scenarios play out on the industrial side, so I won't repeat on that one. The commercial, I've already mentioned, is that we have a surplus of 18 acres, but keep in mind this, Crestview Crossing is under construction. And 23 acres or so of that site, it was commercial that's going to have housing on it. That's the way the code is structured. They went through the land use process. So as that builds out over the next several years, that surplus of commercial land is going to go away. We're going to be in a deficit. And that could mean in the future, updating the EOA again to address the commercial component. So I started doing some early numbers and looking at, well, what if we took that 31-acre surplus of low-density residential and we said, oh, well, let's take some of that, not saying where, but just land, and say, let's take 31 acres and let's go through a comp plan and zone change and upzone that to medium density. That still leaves you a deficiency of medium density and high density. What if you took that low density and went to high density? Still leaves you with a deficiency of high density and medium density. What if we took that surplus of 18 acres of commercial and we said, well, maybe we'll add that to the mix and see what happens, and we still come out deficient in our medium density and our high density. So the numbers keep coming back to, which direction are we going to go as a community as we move forward? Then kind of go to think of it walking up the stairs, go to the next level and say, oh, well, let's do some of that comp plan zone change within the existing UGB, but let's also do a UGB expansion. So you kind of take all those first scenarios and then you start to add in, well, if we did a UGB expansion, where? Well, the first place you look at is your urban reserves. So we have the North Hills Urban Reserve, which is up behind the Allison, between Springbrook and Aspen, all the way up to Bell Road. And that one's about 412 acres in size, gross acres. We've got another one down off of Clemic, out by the hospital, off of Clemic and Harmony. That one's about 28 acres. And then we have another one off of Springbrook, back behind the manufactured home park, which is in the corridor for the bypass, which ODOT has been buying up land through there. And then we've got another one, which is down off of Winooski. So out where Waste Management is located. And that one has about 49 acres of land. So then I start to look at it and say, well, what does our public infrastructure plans look like? And well, we've got a future reservoir up above Bell Road. We've got the Bell West and Bell East booster pump stations for water. And then you start to look at it and say, well, if you're going to potentially do an urban growth boundary expansion, you want to have that where you're planning to already have your infrastructure. So that's another variable that we need to take into consideration. And so the North Hills might be acceptable for housing. Remember, we already have a provision in our code that says if you're annexing more than 15 acres if you're annexing or you're doing a UGB expansion of more than 15 acres, 10% of that land has to be for high density residential. So we've already got some triggers that we did. Rick, what was that, about 3 years ago now, just before Steve retired. The Clemic and Harmony area, I want to kind of set the seed is that, and I mentioned it earlier in this, in the health industry sector, is that it's growing. As the population grows, we'll need more health services. And so is that Clemic Harmony area, is that really better to consider for more health service uses in the future rather than residential? A question, again, don't need an answer, just something for you all to think about. That Springbrook Road one between Fernwood and Wilsonville on the backside of the manufactured home park, there's not a lot left. There'll be some little sliver remnant pieces by the time they're done. But that might be a possibility. And then of course, there's the Winooski, and it's already surrounded by industrial. And do you want to put residential next to industrial and create those conflicts where overhead doors and, you know, beeping and backing up in trucks and forklifts and those kinds of things? So you can kind of take 1 and 2 and you say, well, or A and B as it's written in the memo, and say, well, we just want to just do a UGB expansion and address all of our deficiencies in our medium and high density by just expanding the UGB. So that is yet another option. Some similar things play out on the industrial side. I mentioned this 18-acre surplus of commercial land. Well, what if you took 18 acres of commercial and changed it to industrial? Well, when you kind of look at where you might have 18 acres of commercial, we've got one on College and Mountain View. And it's surrounded by residential. And so again, you know, want to consider, do you put industrial where you have conflicts where people are living? I anticipate that somebody might ask, well, what about the mill site? Well, the mill site is not part of that 152 acres plus the additional 12 for public and semi-public. That is actually in a category of redevelopment land. So then we start to look again back at these urban reserves, which is the first place that you would look. And of course, the North Hills is hilly. And manufacturing is looking for flat sites. And so if you can find some flat sites, it might end up being surrounded by residential again. And it's like, do we want to create those kinds of conflicts or not? Then we come back to the issue about Clemic and Harmony. Well, somebody says, we'll put industrial there. Well, if we have a growing sector in the healthcare, you know, should we be forward thinking and saying, well, maybe that's a location where we have some additional healthcare services? The area off of Springbrook Road again, it would be near residential again, so that potentially there could be conflicts. And again, there's remnant pieces that are out there by the time the bypass goes in. And then you've got Winooski Road where you already have industrial. And so that Winooski is on the south side of Winooski Road. So it does really include the waste management, some of the mill site over by Dog Ridge Road kind of concepts. And so again, choices, you know, and going through, there's not enough land to address the industrial. It's just, we don't have enough excess residential land or commercial land to meet the industrial deficit. So in your RCA, I then kind of outlined this hierarchy that we look at through a UGB expansion process. And so again, the first place you look is in your urban reserves. Second place you look is the exception land. So again, at that attachment 7 to your memo is the graphic that really tells you, you know, all this resource land and where we have exception land is really over on the west side. And if you went on the west side and if you could find a developer who said, I'm going to go through a bunch of land assemblage, then we're back to pushing truck traffic back through downtown, which is counter to what the purpose of the bypass was, is to get the truck traffic out of downtown. So again, there's always tension in these things. Then you look at those brown areas and they are different categories. There's class 4 through 6 soils, which are called low value resource lands. That's where you would look next. The last place that you look is your class 1, 2, and 3 soils, which is your high value resource lands. And I have maps that detail all this out, but I just wanted to give you kind of the simple one on that attachment number 7. So we wanted to start this conversation tonight and allow you kind of let me explain what was a thought process on this. Then you guys can ask questions. But we thought we'd come back on June 21st and follow up with any questions you may have. If you want to get down a little bit deeper detail on some things, that would give me an opportunity to do that. And we'll have another conversation. That one I'll probably bring back a PowerPoint just because I didn't do one tonight. I feel like, you know, the college professor who gave you a take-home quiz, which is, you know, 4 times as hard as doing it in class. But if the council wants to get to a point where they want to do an urban growth boundary expansion, there's a process, and it's called Division 24, which is traditionally UGB. And so we would notify DLCD through a post-acknowledgement plan amendment process that we're going to initiate a UGB, and we would set a date out in the future when we would be holding hearings. Part of the reason of doing that is to lock in our population projection. We don't want, because those change every 3 years. Then with the EOA and the HNA and the public and semi-public, we would take the next step and we would actually officially adopt those. And it kind of comes in a twofold way. One is that we would update the respective sections for each one of those elements in our comprehensive plan and adopt those 3 analyses that were done to support that comprehensive plan change. Those again require a process of what's called a PAPA, post-acknowledgement plan amendment process. And we do all that work and we would send it off to the state, and we'd have to have hearings, planning commission hearings, city council hearings, and see if anybody contests our comprehensive plan changes or not. And so that was kind of the bullet number 6 under that category, is just respond to any legal challenges on those 3 documents. And if we can get through all 3 of those, then you actually start into the analysis process of doing the UGB. And don't assume it happens quickly. It takes time. In the proposed budget, there was $300,000 in there for consultant services to start with, to help us go through this process of doing a UGB expansion. So I always say it takes several years, not a year. I'm not going to say 2. It's going to take several years to go through a UGB expansion program. For those that are new, the city's tried this before. We did one for the Southeast industrial area, and it was only for employment industrial land, and it did not look at commercial and residential. This time I put together the whole package so nobody could say, oh, we just go over here and change this residential to industrial and you're good and you're fine. Well, we didn't have any data back then to support or refute any of those particular questions or assertions. So now we've got the full body of work in place to make some informed, data-driven decisions about where the council would like to go in the future. So with that, I'm going to stop. See if you have questions.
Questions. Let's go broad stroke questions, folks, if we can, because as Doug said, we're going to be back at this on the 21st. So, but any broad brush stuff? No. Okay. It's like this super 3D game of Sim City, really, isn't it? Sort of.
Well, you get into potentially this kind of
Mike with a question.
Oh yeah, here, Mike, please.
So if we were to hire a consultant, I mean, are there like specialists out there that specialize in helping cities, you know, expand their urban growth boundary? Because I know that I understand that there's a lot of obstacles to go through. So if we're going to hire a consultant, is that what we would be trying to look for?
Yes. And so there are professional practitioners who do this for a living, of working with communities to help them expand their urban growth boundaries. And I mean, for us, it even gets down to, as you're refining, if the decision was made, yes, we need to do an urban growth boundary expansion. So first of all, we got to look at efficiencies or consider efficiencies while we're going through this process. But if it's concluded that, yes, we need some additional land, if any of those additional lands are in what's a potential stream corridor, we also have to hire a consultant to do an analysis of that stream corridor to match the analysis for the stream corridor we already have, because you may have a gross acreage area, but we need to get down to the net after we take out rights of way and stream corridors and, geologic areas and so forth. So yes, council, there are specialists out there that help cities do this.
Stephanie.
So this is a very broad stroke question, and I don't necessarily need an answer tonight, but do we have an idea about what our neighbors are doing, in particular Dundee? And are there areas of conflict or partnership in those sort of places that play into these kinds of decisions?
The city of Lafayette did an urban growth boundary expansion for residential several years ago. McMinnville they were in a UGB expansion just like Newberg was. They did go through that process again recently, and they may be looking at something again in the future. So each community, so it's all population driven. So it goes back to this PRC population numbers. So each community has to look at their urban growth boundary and say, do we have enough land for residential and employment purposes over that 20-year horizon? Remember, we're required by state laws, we have to plan for a land supply for 20 years. So all 10 cities within Yamhill County need to go through this. It's just, we're in the queue now.
So I have a follow-up. So even more specifically, I guess my question is, do we know in particular what Dundee is doing and where they're at and what their projections look like and how that impacts us or how we impact them? Or if there is, because we're so close in proximity, what that looks like on that side of town, I guess is sort of what I'm asking in terms of, do we run into any conflicts with them, or do we run into any places where we could partner with them in terms of getting what we need and what they need?
Interesting question. City of Dundee has their Riverside plan. So that's kind of their future for the next 20 years. We have not had any conversations with the county administrator. He has not brought up about, a UGB expansion, but there have been historic conversations about separations of community, especially along the corridor between Newberg and Dundee. And at one point in time, there was some consensus amongst the cities to create some language for that separation of communities. Unfortunately, and this was back in the mid 80s, I think it was, and it never advanced forward. And so there's still that issue that's sitting out there. Does Newberg and Dundee want to grow together, or do we want to create some kind of green space between the two cities so they keep their own individual identity?
I think I heard, and I've got to confirm this, but I thought McMinnville's UGB was approved just relatively recently.
It was,
yeah.
But they used a lot of the data they had from before. I don't know all the details.
Right.
But they've also still got, that may not have been enough to give them their 20-year supply. So, Woodburn spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and they finally negotiated a deal where they got some UGB expansion.
Yeah, and Stephanie, that was a really good question about Dundee, because I remember not too long ago driving around with Sid Friedman and looking at the properties between here and there, and it's highly parcelized. That's the other thing, is it's just there's some small chopped up lots in there. So anyway,
and we also have to look at infrastructure. So when we were doing the simplified UGB process, when we started down that path, and then the council terminated because we found that it didn't work, is that we got to the point of starting the infrastructure analysis, and our consultants said, well, that's a 7-figure number to do the analysis based upon the way the administrative rule is written. And we were working under a grant, a $30,000 grant. It was like, this isn't going to work. So we did kind of a first high level cut looking at infrastructure. And, it's a challenge. You've got Chehalem Creek and you got to get across the creek. So as we've been moving to try to have fewer lift stations for our wastewater system, you we have to take into consideration, if you go west, you're across the creek. Now you're going to be putting in lift stations to pump that stuff up. And then, again, no answers to this, but then we have to look at all of the existing infrastructure we have to get to our water wastewater plant and what needs to be upsized. And so, Council McBride, that's where it gets complicated. And that's why you need professionals on board to help you figure all this out. So in the Simplify, we started looking at some of this area to the west, and all of a sudden, we were going way back into the city on our west side to upsize pipes to make them big enough so that you could expand to potentially to the west.
All right, other questions or thoughts for Doug before the meeting on June 21st? The one I will ask, I'll ask it now, Doug. It doesn't need to be answered now, but just the relative difficulty of upzoning, and just if we can touch on that, on the 21st, that would be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would say, if any of you have any thoughts in the next couple of weeks, please send me an email with your questions. Okay. It would be very helpful to put together a package for the next discussion. I tried to keep this at a higher level for this first one. I mean, Rick knows I can go way down into a lot of details really quickly. But let's think of it at a higher level, what might we need to do? And there are challenges with everything. And so when we talk about efficiencies, think about the, little less than 50 work items we got to deal with housing. And many of those are addressing efficiency issues.
Not to really put the pressure on to underscore this, but this is really sort of the future of this community. I hate to bring it to that level, but really how we expand, how we do it, where we do it is really pretty much pretty important for strategic planning purposes, etc. So anyway, all right. Anything else? Anything else, Doug, on that? Bryce, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one quick question, again, not necessarily for now, but for when we come back in June. You'd mentioned a couple times, I believe on the east side, hesitations to consider both residential and industrial because of the potential of wanting to maintain space for medical offices, buildings, things of that nature. I don't know if there are folks, I'm looking at like Elise, because she's the only person I know in medical in Newberg, but like folks we might talk to better get an understanding of what their sort of projected expectations are around development, because it seems to be an area that if they're like, nah, we don't really think so, or we're planning to accommodate increased population in X, Y, and Z ways, that might open up other potential options.
All right, other comments or questions, folks? All right, seeing none. Doug, thank you. Thanks very much for that intro, because this is, yeah, it's important stuff. So, and it's, yeah, and it many facets to this particular puzzle. So there you go.
Thank you all.
Yep, thanks, Doug. All right, what else do we got here this evening? I lost my thing. What else? I think we got committee reports. Yeah, committee, any reports for what might be going on? Nope. Sue, what about the LOC webinar?
So I brought this to your attention because I know homelessness is one of our council goals. There are four bills in session at the legislature. 2 have already passed and were effective upon passage. And the LOC is going to have, the League of Oregon Cities, is going to have a webinar this Friday from 1 to 2:30. It's not a class, it's just legislative staff updating on those 4 bills. They will record it and put it on the website after. So if you want to register, I can sign you up. If you don't have time this Friday from 1 to 2:30, but want to watch the recorded one, let me know. And just send me an email and I will send you the link once they post it. So I think those were, oh gosh, Rick, I sent you a.
Oh, I got it in the email somewhere.
So hang on just a sec. I do want to mention them by name because they're kind of important.
Yeah.
And we'll have to, oh, here it is. But it's in really tiny print. Oh, my trifocals. Okay, HB 2006, which affects emergency shelter siting, and that was effective as of May 12th. HB 3261, motel conversion to shelter and affordable housing, and that took effect as of May 6th. HB 3115, local homeless ordinances, and HB 3124, notice of campsite removal.
All right, thank you, Sue. So if anyone's interested in signing up for it, please contact Sue. All right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, good deal. Thank you all, and I'll strive to do better on these hearings in the future. And anyway, otherwise, greatly appreciate it. You know, staff, first off, thank you so much. I mean, I think really what Doug was talking about and all of this stuff that is so interwoven is hugely important. So thank you for all that you do every day. And you all you volunteers, because remember, that's what you all are in this stuff. Thank you for what you do. Get the word out. Vote tomorrow, right? If you haven't voted yet, vote tomorrow. We got a couple of things going on. So let's get that word out and keep people getting vaccinated too. Got to send them all to Elise. Send these bodies to Elise. So, all right. Anything else? All right. Otherwise, go Blazers, and we'll talk to you all soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Oh.